This is all about love. The fact that when you're in the afterlife, I would use the term heaven. He's telling us it is all about complete love, unconditional.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. My name is Chris Lippincott, and I can't wait to share with you another great host. Her name is Tammy Young, and she's quite a gifted, dedicated psychic medium out of Austin, Texas. So Tammy, thank you so much for coming on. This is going to be a great episode.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'm excited to be here. It's always so interesting to talk to another psychic medium and share stories of things that have happened in our lives. So, yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate this.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm sure everybody who's listening is gonna listen with rapt ears because of all the things you've been through. I mean, I love interviewing other mediums and hearing all of their experiences. And seeing similar experiences with different lenses, and it's something that you've certainly undergone. I mean, you're also a Reiki master as well. So one thing I've noticed is a lot of people who are now mediums were previously doing Reiki, and that came through as a result. Was that what happened with you? What was it? Reiki first, then mediumship, vice versa? How'd that all work out?
I guess I'm a little different than the norm because I, for me, psychic started and then the mediumship came on top of that. I actually didn't know that there was a difference between those two things. But as my mediumship progressed, and I was talking with other mediums, I had one particular friend that said, you need to go get some like Reiki schooling. And he kept telling me this like over like a year. And finally I said, I don't understand why you think that this is he said, well, I think there's something with your energy because I would have spirit come forward with so much energy. I would burst into tears. And they're like, you can't hardly do much else when you're crying. I'm like, I know, this is so weird. The Reiki, the energy, knowing how to guide that and use that and feel in a way that doesn't sort of destroy and overwhelm you in this process. Yeah, it absolutely was just what I needed. So I'm thrilled to have that and know something about Reiki also.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the important things about Reiki is knowing that Reiki is, energy healing and being able to not only use it for yourself, but also ultimately then to turn around with that understanding and be able to provide that same energy healing with other people. And it sounds like, you also had spirit with you to help with the spiritual healing, because that's what they do in mediumship anyway. They come through and they help heal the recipient, but it sounds like they're working through you as the vessel to give the energy healing, the spiritual healing, whether it's hands-on or otherwise.
Yes. I actually don't specifically practice like Reiki healing in my home, other than if someone is with me for a reading and health issues pop up. There's a discussion there about because as mediums we can usually kind of feel what others are feeling, and using that in a Reiki sense and helping them to sort of understand how this is also connected to their own energy that either they're producing or creating because of other things in their lives. Like it's just a huge web of information, isn't it? I mean, when we
Yeah.
do things like that.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It's all energy, and we're all connecting to the energy, whether we actually are consciously aware of it, or we've opened up to it, or we sense it and we don't know why. And I think to your point, it's all absolutely something about an awareness. We have to open
Yeah.
ourselves up to that awareness that the energy, the spirit energy, is always around us. Hence the name of the show,
Yes.
Spirits Around Us,
Right.
beside us.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And it's not only spirit in the sense of those who have passed, but the physical people around you,
Yeah.
all of that. And all of that really can react with you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just kind of understanding all of that, accepting that idea that we're all energy and that we interact in that
Yeah.
way. It's
Oh,
important.
totally, totally, and that goes right to quantum physics, but that
Yeah.
states that 99.999% of everything in existence is energy anyway, and
Yeah.
energy can either be created or destroyed. So when we think we're these flesh and bone solid beings, and in fact we're nothing but energy, air. If you were to go close up, we'd actually be able to see through ourselves, but that's
Yeah.
that's a whole nother concept, and we could go down that rabbit hole. But I think I'll just stay at the surface for that one. So, I mean, how did you come into your spirituality, your psychic awareness, your mediumship? Was this something that I think you said you had always been aware of it, but what was it? What was your sort of your background like, your family life, your childhood life? Had you get here from there?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a big question, isn't it?
Unpack it all.
Well, let's see. Um, I would say that my childhood was kind of weird, like for most people, right?
Sure.
But as far as understanding when spirit showed up for me, I would say as a child, um, and for me, I just remember one very specific time when I'm like in the kitchen working with mom. She's cooking away, and I'm a kid, so maybe I'm like 10 or something, and she's got me slicing and dicing like carrots or whatever. And I am chattering away, but it's only the two of us in the kitchen. I'm not talking to her. And she kind of says, "Hey, like, what's going on over there?" And I just, well, like, what do you mean? And she's like, "Well, who are you talking to?" I was like, "Oh, you don't know?" I mean, I just didn't know that, like. So she quickly explained to me that's something that we don't do, so don't do that
Ah,
anymore.
one of
And so,
those. Yeah.
right, so you quickly shut that down, like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to be the weird kid because I feel like I already am now.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, so kind of went on with my life, and all the strange choices. I decided to become an electrical engineer.
Electrical engineer. Wow. All right.
Electrical engineer, went to school. My first job out of school was Motorola. So, I was there for a while. And, one of the things that was interesting for me was I felt like I actually had placed myself in a situation where a lot of people were not interested in, like, being present or sharing in their relationships, right? They were there for their job, and they were there and they went home. And
Wow.
that was kind of a strange place for me. Also, in 1990, to be a female in an engineering environment, it was predominantly male.
Oh yeah. Sure.
So, I would have to go to other departments to try to find other women to have lunch with, But the point being that I just really felt very like lonely in my engineering, right? So, anyway, time sort of goes on, and I I got married, and we decided to expand, have a family, and it was during the process of that I think I really felt free, or had to go look for what was going on in my life. I had lost a pregnancy at 20 weeks, and it was devastating for me. I had a son, and this was going to be our little girl, and having lost that pregnancy was devastating.
Hmm.
So, even in the process of sort of coming home, and the friends and people around you, people don't know what to say to you when you're faced with such a devastating loss, right? We all know that, like, nothing makes it better, but
Yeah.
it's hard. So,
Sure.
yeah, I really leaned on that bookstore, and ended up at the bookstore just looking through all the, afterlife books, spirituality books, all those kinds of things. And I just brought those kind of things home, just armful, and that I was reading those because I couldn't figure out why I had lost a baby. I was, for me in the engineering environment, like there's got to be cause and effect for
All
everything.
right.
Why don't we know this? Why don't we understand this? And
Everything's material based.
yeah, yeah, it really is, right? So I was just really at a loss, and this helped me so much. I also found the more I read, the better I felt.
Hmm.
So yeah, so it was kind of during this process that I read a lot, and then God, I'm trying to think about the time period. Um, so there was a time I ended up getting pregnant quickly, unexpectedly after the loss. We decided that we were not ready for another child, and all of a sudden I was pregnant, and it was definitely a situation like a spirit situation where we found out that something we had used was recalled, and we went, what? So that
Wow.
was spirit, man. Spirit was in there going, oh no, you're gonna move on with this little baby here.
Yep. Sure.
So anyway, time goes on, and when my son is like 10 years old, we end up being in a situation together where a boy in his class goes missing, and we had seen this boy the day before, and the police is involved, and they're trying to figure out, where is the guy, what's going on. And so for the first time, I am just, as a mother, I am yanked into this, like, I have to do anything I can because I've read these books. I've heard what people are saying about how they do things. And so I just, I go in my bedroom and I sit in a corner and I'm like, think, like, what's going on? And things start showing up clairvoyantly, and I'm like, okay, so now what do I do? So I made some notes because I didn't know what else to do. As an engineer, I should take notes, right? That's
Oh,
the thing
sure.
you do.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
The
Anyway,
scientific method has to come
right,
through.
right, I didn't even know, right? So that's what I did. I just kind of leaned on those books that I had read, and I just kind of did what I naturally thought I should do. But by the end of the day, he actually came home by himself. And I thought, wow, this was so interesting. The whole, like, the location came to me, where he was, the environment. I'm like, so I kind of put my little toe out there and I said, hey, to his mom, I said, would you show me where he was? And she was very thrilled to do that, which surprised me, but it was very interesting. Everything that I saw was where he was.
Oh, wow.
I was at the point where I was like, okay, I see where you are, but I don't know how to get there. Right. So there's so many sort of little pieces of his story that I'm like, I just don't. So that led me to going to my first class with James von Prague.
Ah, sure.
So
Okay. Yes.
that
Yes,
really
James.
started,
Yeah.
the true path toward, like, understanding what is going on.
Right, exactly. It
Yeah.
often seems like we all have some unusual experience that opens the door that makes us say, okay, well, now I'm experiencing these things. What do I do with it? Either how do I control it? How do I work with it? How do I develop it? How do I unfold it? And we all tend to go to our go-to source, whether it's a local teacher or an international teacher or something, and we try to go that way, and then it seems to unfold from there. So is that kind of what happened with you? You sort of work with studying, through James and Prague and having
Yeah.
those moments of unfoldment.
What's so funny about that was, I live in the South where we don't talk about such things. And at
Right.
that at that time, I there was no local anything. I had no support on that level. I
Yeah.
didn't know anybody who did psychic medium work or anything along those lines. So for me, the reason I went to James von Prague is because I had a book by him,
Hmm.
and I thought, well, I looked him up online and I could see that he had a class that actually was mediumship. But because I didn't know the difference between psychic and mediumship, I went. And when I got there, uh, by day 3, I figured that out. But I was so thrilled to be there and to be welcomed. And he started out like beginner level, and the things that we were doing, I was able to, you're always scared that you like, oh, I'm in my head. I can't figure
Yep.
this. I'm not
Mhm.
getting anything, that kind of stuff.
It's my
And
imagination.
yes, this can't be real. This is goofy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but that's the real thing.
Yeah,
So,
our rational mind, conscious ego mind, the yapping away
yeah,
saying, "Oh no, that can't be real," when in fact, yeah, it is real. So,
yeah.
for listeners out there who might not know the difference, maybe you can differentiate a psychic ability versus a mediumship ability, and tell those listeners, how you went from one understanding to the next.
So, like I said, I didn't really know the difference, but I've learned, right? I think that for me, naturally, everything just worked however I needed to work with it. But over time, as I separate the two, I can see that when I'm working on past, present, future, and I'm working honestly, I can feel my gut in that gut level connection to another person. That's the psychic connection.
Hmm.
When we go and do mediumistic, it's much different. We're working on a much higher level, and we're working with spirit, and that really comes, through the crown. It's a
Right.
very different thing.
Yeah, so
um,
so perhaps a good way to summarize it is one of the ways I've come to learn it is that psychic ability is connecting to the incarnate energy, people on Earth.
yeah.
We're working with the same lower frequency, our frequency, so it's one on one. Look at it from the horizontal plane of a graph, whereas mediumship, we're working at a much higher vibration, higher frequency, connecting with the spiritual level. Call that the vertical axis on the graph, and so those are the two directions that we're heading. And everybody's got these abilities, but we most
Yes.
readily use the psychic abilities like intuition. Everybody's like, I got that gut feeling. Well,
Yeah.
people don't recognize that as a psychic ability, and everybody uses it. It's like, how many times you go outside and say, well, I feel like there's something telling me I got to go get that umbrella. Nah, forget it. You come back and you're absolutely soaked.
Right. I love that too, and I love how those discussions, people will sort of try to separate the idea that, oh, I don't believe in that stuff, I don't do that, I don't know what you mean. But yeah, I did, go back and get my umbrella. It's like,
Yeah.
no, but you're if you're a human being, you have the tools.
Exactly, and that goes
So
right back to the our ancient hindbrain that humans used to actually use all the time before we had conversation. The ability to converse. So hundreds of thousands of years ago, we were very much like the animals in that we would use our psychic senses to gather that much more information that we couldn't harness any other way or communicate any other way. And once we began to work with communication, that hindbrain became dormant, and now we use the frontal lobe, and now it's a much different part of our brain. So the psychic abilities, the non-physical abilities, went dormant in the back part of our brain, and it's just sitting there right below the surface. All we got to do is learn to turn it on.
yeah. No, I think it's one of the most powerful things that we have sort of the option to use.
Yeah.
And I think when you make that choice to just pull it into the awareness that this is how I deal with things all the time,
Mm-hmm.
it really makes life so much easier.
Oh, absolutely. And what I'm finding, and I don't know if you're experiencing this as well, is that more and more people around the world are becoming more, I don't want to say used to, but they're starting to becoming a little bit more accepting of those concepts that, there is something beyond us, that we do actually emit energy. We are energy. And since energy cannot be destroyed, the energy goes somewhere. And that's the me that we think of as the age of whether we're 5 or 105, that's always in existence. That me doesn't change at all. It's always there. I'm
Yeah.
starting to see that more and more people are starting to click with that. There's like I want to call it sort of like the evolution of humanity's awareness is starting to slowly grow. However, that's happening. I don't know if are you feeling that too?
I absolutely am. I feel like now I want to say these two little babies I was talking about before are now. I have two sons, so one is 30 and one is like 26. I think right.
Uh-oh.
I'm gonna get in trouble for that one.
Yeah.
But even they have gone an engineering route. They both have master's degrees, but both of them are willing to have these discussions with me, and I'm very thrilled with, I expected to kind of have them say, "Oh, mom, that's silly stuff,"
Yeah.
and they're engaged, and they're
Really.
they're telling me their friends are engaged, and I'm very very thankful. I think this idea of having the spiritual and the technical together, that engagement of both together, I think would be very powerful for us humans to put them together.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of always been something for my sons. Like, I don't want you to just go a logical route. I really want you to engage in more
Hmm.
because you are so much more. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do feel like I'm seeing it. Whether it's just people I choose to engage with or not, but it just feels like more people are open to listening to this idea that there's more to us, that this is not our only life, and there is a possibility of communicating with those that have passed.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so interesting because I can remember. I mean, my son is also in engineering. He's doing biomolecular sciences, something that's way above my pay grade. I can't even understand some of the things he comes home and talks about from college. I'm just like, what? So hopefully he's ending his studies this year. God only knows how long more it's going to go on. But yeah, for longest time, and I think still to this day, he's still at that linear stage of, Dad, you believe in the big man in the sky. But you can sort of see there's that little twinge of curiosity back there every so often. It's like it's becoming less and less um, what's the word, adamant about his belief system. It's starting to, it's just like an aircraft carrier. It's starting to slowly evolve and change and turn. And one thing I know, there's at least two people that he was friends with, and then a friend of his had actually asked me, and at the time they were teenagers. She came and she through a couple of people ultimately asked if I could do a reading for her, and sure, because her boyfriend had died, and so we do the reading. And it was just a beautiful connection, and that's absolutely wonderful. And so she clearly, absolutely was wide open to this. Her friend was wide open to it. And once it kind of trickled down to my son, you could start to see the light just starting to crack right through the little door. It was like this little
Yeah.
cracks of light starting to come through. And he's like, huh? What? You mean
Right.
maybe?
Yeah,
No, that's not possible.
this might be real.
Yeah, so you can start to see the question marks, popping up where before they were never there. It's kind of like little seeds of grass are starting to sprout more grass.
Yeah. I had a very similar situation to that because as my kids were going through school, they would listen to me and we would have conversations, but I always felt like there was probably this little backstory going on, or behind, once they get in the car and leave, they'd be like, oh, I think she's lost it again, but we're going to listen to her. But
Yeah,
in 2020, um, the whole thing was blown open for them because I had gotten a reading from someone in 2019 in the UK. And she said, oh, she kept giving me all this evidence. It just didn't fit. And I'm like, I know this lady is, spot on with her evidence. I don't understand why this doesn't fit. And I was kind of getting concerned. And all of a sudden she stopped. She took a deep breath and she said, I'm telling you the truth. Like, you have a sibling that you don't know anything about. And I was like, okay, she just told me. She just gave me a little what for there. Like, okay. She goes, and he's going to find you through DNA analysis. And I went, what? Like, here she is even telling me how this is going to happen. And she said, have you done that? And I said, no. And I was like, well, should I? She goes, well, that's how they're going to find you. it was just my brother and I didn't know that I had another sibling.
Wow.
No clue. So, of course, because of this, I come home and I'm like, I talk to my brother and I'm like, have you done any of that? He says, no, I'm not going to do that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay. So I talk to my sons and I'm like, I have to tell you about this reading because there's a possibility this sibling could contact you trying to find like me and my brother. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. So I had to really out myself like on every level with that
Mm.
story.
Yeah.
And and then when it came true, they are completely in. And
Yeah.
that's what my book is about. It is that story from that moment on.
Wow.
And they've been along for the ride the whole time. So now when I think about them before and I think about them now,
Yeah. Oh, I can
I just
imagine.
have to laugh.
Yeah, right. So what is your book and what's it all about?
Thanks for asking. It's called Afterlife Bonds. And I do have a little ragtag picture here.
Afterlife Bonds. There it is. Okay.
Yeah. And it's how spirit communication turned my grief into a journey of joy.
Hmm.
And it's by me, Tammy Young. But it is the story. It is that story of once I heard from the psychic. I was actually taking a class with a bunch of other psychics, and it was a year-long class, and somebody had had a reading from this lady, and they said, oh my gosh, she's really awesome. So we all jumped in to get readings, and the money was donated to the animal shelter, all good things. So, yeah, this book starts at that moment when her name is Deb Nicholson. And when she gave me this reading, uh, that was in 2019. My brother showed up in 2020. And then how things progressed to him passing to the other side, the whole story that goes through that. And then beyond that, 2 years, how he continues to communicate the things that he did with me that even as a medium, I thought I was pretty good at, like, I have this is how I do readings, psychic readings, mediumship, but he blew the boots off. After he passed, he showed me that there was much more that I could be doing. So I mean the stories are just hilarious. I have to tell you one story which
Yeah.
just makes me giggle. So one day I do meditate every morning.
Good.
It
Good.
starts my day. It's a great way.
That's what I tell
So
everybody to do, whether they want to or not. I say you got to live at least 5 minutes a day. There you go.
yeah, because it really gets you centered.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's my
Right.
life. That's
Yeah.
what I do.
Good.
So I had sat down one morning and I had this huge feeling like I need to draw. You can imagine, as an electrical engineer, that was not my forte at all.
Yep.
And I kept feeling this feeling about kind of making this arc or this circle. I kept feeling. I thought I could feel it in my arms, so I sat down and I just did it in the air, and I didn't know what that was. So I got my journal out and I just drew this big circle, and I sat there for a minute, and then it was a triangle. I sat there for a minute and I erased part of the triangle. Then I ended up with like another, I think, circle around it. This ended up being, when I looked at it, it looked like a chicken wearing a sombrero. And I thought, that is like, and here's the thing, up until that point, I didn't have humor in my mediumship. So to see something like that when I was trying to be, serious and meditate, I was
Mhm.
like, this is weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I added little pom poms. I'm in Texas. I added the pom poms because clearly I had forgotten those. And then I wondered if this had anything to do with my brother that passed. So I checked in with his daughter, and his daughter sent me a picture of, on his birthday, his favorite Mexican restaurant. They do things like give you ice cream and sing, but at this restaurant, you had to wear a sombrero.
Uh huh.
And his face was pointed up even in the same way as the chicken.
Oh boy.
I I just couldn't believe it. To me, those are super evidential because the bottom line is I didn't know that much about my brother, because from the time that he did find us, and I'd say, I think it was the funeral. It was 6 months. It wasn't a year, 2 years. There's so much I didn't know about him that when I operated with him, everything had to be evidential that I could check with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So even like things like that, right? Like there's evidence in drawing. There's evidence in almost everything that we like can do during meditation, automatic writing, of course, all the clairs, the way that we receive information, right? Whether it's smelling, tasting, seeing, hearing. He really opened my world into so much more than, just maybe the two or three things I thought that I was halfway decent at.
No,
So yeah.
it sounds like he really opened up the doors for you and was, one of your larger helpers in your group of helpers in your spirit team. He was the one who was kind of helping open the doors, helping giving you the direction you needed to follow and the things you needed to work on.
Yeah, I mean, it was really amazing to me. And he is one of my volunteer spirit guides. So
Volunteer, absolutely. He's not
I love that.
he's not the professional spirit guide who's been trained for, eons to do what it is they do and walk on our path. He's the one who just kind of showed him, say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to help you out."
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I at the end of my book, I had another reading with a person that's in the Netherlands.
Mm.
His name is Rick Vandermeer, and we know how it is for mediums. If you say, "Hey, is it okay if I talk to my grandmother?" Traditionally we're going to say, "I can't tell you exactly who's going to come through, but we can definitely connect. We can ask your grandmother to come forward." So when I talked to Rick, I said, "Hey, can we talk to my brother? I realize he may not show up or whatever." And he was very kind, and he said, "Yeah, let's just try it. Let's just see." And I mean, he did two readings for me, and they are just amazing. To
No,
hear what Matt has to say from the other side, it's just cool, you
that's
know?
great. Does your brother give you good descriptions of what they do on the other side, how he's living, how what his experiences are over there?
He is mostly talking about his life specifically, and I asked him for his life because I feel like there's not a lot that I knew about here.
Yeah.
So now that you've passed, well, at least tell me exactly what's going on over there. And it's very interesting to think that he is now healing from the situation that our family was in, that he's healing from that, and how about 2 years after he passed, my father passed,
Hmm.
and so how did that situation go? It's really been astounding, and it really does. And he tells us it all comes down to love. This is all about love. The fact that when you're in the afterlife, I would use the term heaven. I think, or he's telling us, it is all about complete love, unconditional.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so the idea of coming, having a life here is that we really get to understand what love is about, because when we're with it all the time, we don't understand how important it is, how awesome. But when you're in a situation where it's taken away from you, or you have to figure out, how do I achieve that? It's a drastically different thing.
That's so true, and there have been a number of circumstances, a number of times where, you know, I'll be in a trance circle. I'll go into a trance, and guides come through me and describe that very issue, where the only way that we can learn the thing is to first experience its opposite. How can you know the thing if you don't know what the contrasting thing is? So how can you know
Yes.
about love without experiencing the lack of love? How can you experience joy if you don't know what its opposite, pain is? How can you, understand unconditional love if you don't experience, hatred? It's all these things. So part of our lessons in the physical are undergoing and experiencing different things that teach us certain lessons, whether it's forgiveness or patience or understanding, but also undergoing all of those unfortunate issues that teach us the contrast. It's like everything's two sides of a coin. You've got if you want to know what heads is, you first have to know what the tails happens to be. Otherwise, you've
Yeah.
got no, there's what's the phrase I'm looking for? Relative understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved the concept, his clarity of the concept, whether that was Rick or that was my brother. That message came through so clear that it really realigned me with I what I feel and want to live with is that whole idea that we're here to figure out what that is, and I think it just makes it easier on all of us if we try to live by that too. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, the number of times, I joke when people say, "Well, you're experiencing this life, and you are, all the garbage that you're dealing with, and that's part of your soul contract." And I start to think of myself, "What? I signed up for this? What was I crazy?"
Right?
So
I have that same thing. I'm like, really? How interesting.
why was I?
I'm
Why did I sign up for this?
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice if they, you could like glimpse at that soul contract and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, now I remember. Okay."
But then, that's the whole problem is if that's why we have spiritual amnesia is so that we don't really understand or remember just how great it was
Yeah.
being in spirit. Because if we understood just how great it was, we wouldn't be learning as much as we are now. Goes right back to that, you have to experience and fully grapple with the opposite of the thing it is that you're learning.
Yeah, I totally agree because I think in those terms, it would be so easy to be really passive about my life or where what I wanted to experience next or where what I wanted to do or go or anything like that. If I felt like there was sort of this out at the end of my life.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you only know what you know now, then you become I mean, your soul's got to be involved in that decision. Like, what am I really going to do that's going to further me along?
Hmm.
So, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's so important for us. Sometimes it's just hard to believe that, though. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, exactly. But then, you can look at it also from the concept of, the common saying that, we're all here on the Earth School trying to learn our school lessons, etc. Um, and if we actually remembered what it felt like to have that incredible unconditional love and peace, it would be like the teacher coming along and giving us the answers to the test. You can't
agreed.
do that. You can't do that because we wouldn't learn.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, we're here to do the work, and we are. So,
Yeah, and it's kind of like building muscle. You got to go to the gym, and it's like the saying, "No pain, no gain." Well, there's a little bit of truth to that,
yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
and it may not be fun, but just think of all the things that we can actually be grateful for, the little things, right?
Yes, definitely.
I think that's kind of the interesting thing. So, in your book, you're also, you were talking about automatic writing and meditation. These were things that were coming from your brother. He was kind of, giving you those tools, those arrows in your quiver to start learning.
So I would say like the drawing was definitely him. That chicken in the sombrero was definitely him.
Okay.
But I enjoyed automatic writing, and especially at the time right after his death. Of course, there was a lot of grieving going on for me. Even during because we knew that what was kind of going to happen with him. Um, but what was interesting was I may, have a very solemn automatic writing session, be done with that. And on one instance, like as soon as I got done and like put my pencil down, I saw this picture of it was like elf legs and it had elf shoes with the tips pointed up and it was striped socks. And I thought, I mean, that just made me giggle. And I thought, oh, what is going on here? Like, and that became, I noticed that every time like I was sad or there was moments I really just broke down crying. And somewhere in the middle or towards the end of that, like, okay, I'll give her her moment, but this has got to stop. He would do something. And it was, like I said, as a medium, it was not sort of in my purview or in my portfolio to kind of have those two things happen at once.
Yeah.
So to go from one directly to the other, I was like, oh, wait a minute. So that's why part of my title here is a journey of joy
Yeah.
in dealing with grief, because I realized that he was with me and he was trying to make me giggle all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
That's good.
appreciate stuff like that,
No, I'm sure. So, I mean, you were talking a lot about your own personal experiences, but with your brother and elsewhere. Have there been any other really remarkable or transformative experiences you've undergone, perhaps giving a reading or helping a client that you've experienced?
Oh my gosh, where do I start?
Yeah.
Right. So I guess I would tell you the one that is sort of the most out there for me. Um, I'm usually pretty reserved. Like if for people with profession, like if I go to my hairdresser, they don't know that this is like the thing that I do. But that's not the case anymore. I had, I was getting my hair cut, and all of a sudden, at the very end of the haircut, she knew I was writing this book. And she said, "So tell me more about this book that you're writing. Like, what's kind of the deal with that? What's it about?" And I thought that was interesting because she knew this, but she never asked me about this, in the year before. And I said, "Well, kind of has to do with, people in the afterlife and communication." She goes, "Well, the reason I'm asking you is because my husband died this week." And
Mm.
I was shocked. I asked her to repeat that. I'm like, I didn't hear what you said, because we had just spent half an hour together, her cutting my hair. I didn't even know that. Well, that's all she had to say, because boom, he was right there.
Wow.
And it was so powerful. So you could tell she was struggling not to totally break down. And there was a bride there getting her hair. I said,
Oh
okay.
no.
So I said, well, I just want to let you know, like, this is what I do. I'm going to give you a call, or I'll just send you information. She goes, yeah, okay. So I, went home, did my thing, sent her some information. And so like a month later, I didn't hear anything from her in that month. She didn't book an appointment. She didn't call me back. And I thought, that's okay, because, I have never approached people for this reason. I don't want to push anything on
Right.
them. So the
Yeah.
next time I go in, during the hair and everything, and she comes over to me and says, "I haven't booked anything because, um, well, I'm kind of scared. I don't know what this is about or how it works, or, you know, and I'm just going to cry the whole time." And I said, "Well, he's here again. I mean, he follows me every time I get my hair done. He just goes with me because he knows that she's going to work on my hair." So I'm like, "Well, he's here again." I said, "Let's book an appointment." Anyway, we booked an appointment at my house, and he was there, 1,000%. He showed up. He's telling us his birthday and what his celebration is, and how much he's sorry for having broken up the love, that the two of them shared. And anyway, it was just awesome, and it was one of those just wonderful things that I kind of broke the rule, because she needed to hear from him, but she wasn't quite sure. A lot of
Hmm.
times, not all religions are very accepting of this idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's so true. It's unfortunate, both it's from a religious perspective as well as a cultural perspective. Quite often, people will be I don't want to say indoctrinated, but grow into the belief system that you know mediumship is somehow bad or evil or not something that you do because it leads you down the wrong path, whatever, when in
yeah.
fact it's something that it's just the person that you are in love with who just happens to not be in the physical existence anymore, and they're
Yeah.
trying to knock on your door and trying to get all their information out to you. And if you're shutting them down, guess what you're doing? You're shutting them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got. That's what tell people. It's like, listen, I totally understand where you're coming from, but let's look at it also from. We go right back to quantum physics. That was the thing that kind of got me over the bridge, right? That was because I came from a materialist, agnostic background to the point where, everything had to be proven to me. I was like, no, there's no way in God's green earth that this could even possibly be true. So once it started to open up, once it started to happen, I'm like, okay, how do I explain this rationally? Because my rational mind had to come to grips with it. And so
Yeah.
then that's when Spirit said, oh, okay, you want something rational? Here you go, quantum physics. And I went down the rabbit hole, and sure enough, everything was laid out. I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta take this as real then. And that's when the floodgates just kind of opened up. I'm like, okay, Dodo, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah. And it's funny how people can be so sure of a different belief until
Mhm.
something happens to them.
Yeah.
And then they're just like beyond themselves. And then
Yeah.
when they realize through evidence that there is a connection going on,
Hmm.
then it's like a whole different thing. I mean, and that makes me come back to this whole idea of, oh man, us humans, man, we gotta relax, man. This is
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is a real thing, and we're all so capable of it. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it becomes such a cultural thing, and it seems that I don't know if it's the United States specifically, but it seems like there's so many people that are sort of caught up in a cultural vice that they can't get out of, and it
yeah,
seems like more in the U.S. than it is in other countries. I think the U.S. is maybe one of the last ones to kind of go, oh yeah, sure, mediumship, whatever. But
right,
maybe it's the founding direction of we all the country came here as Protestants, and then it kind of went, we all became a bunch of tight-minded, you know, I won't get into that, but the direction I'm going. It's like, why can't we all just loosen up and just kind of like going, there's more to life than what we see here. It's like,
yeah,
does can you see gravity? No, but it sure works, thank God. Can you see X-rays? No, but they'll burn your skin, all
right,
that kind of stuff. So it's like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because your religious leaders tell you something doesn't mean that they're always going to be right. Have they always been right? Look through the ages, and not necessarily.
yeah. As an electrical engineer, that's exactly where I fell. I I know electricity exists because you can see what happens with it,
Right.
right? But I couldn't see it. We have to use instruments to measure it and create it. But so I definitely was involved with that. I mean, that whole idea of like, well, wait a minute, I already can't see something that there's results with. Spirit's no different. And
Totally.
I think with this whole idea of like our culture or whatever that is in the United States, my book, I was really concerned about helping to start the conversation or open the conversation or further the conversation if you're
Right.
already having it, right?
Yep.
But I was finding people that were, you know, grieving over my brother's death had no basis, or they had no religious founding, but then they also didn't have anything around like the idea of mediumship. So they kind of were in this really tough spot
Hmm.
trying to work their way through grief. So anyway, that was my impetus on why I should write that book, was to try to start the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's so interesting because I think we touched on this earlier. Is that we all have this ability because it's all inherent in the back of our brain. Um, Yet culturally, religiously, whatever, for some reason, it's always been suppressed. Plus the fact that biologically it's been hidden. What would you say to a listener that they can, in fact, connect to that intuitive aspect of their ability? How can they actually begin to walk down that path? Maybe they're curious, maybe they've heard others say that they can do it, but they're just not positive. What would you say to that listener who's like saying, I that intuitive thing sounds interesting, what do I do?
I would tell people really to be curious and explore. And whether you are reading books, which I think is the easiest
Mm,
initial aspect. Start reading books, get informed and educated on, what are these people talking about when they talk about the clairs or they talk about methods that they've used, and just work your way from intuition, looking at symbols and signs and those things that we know are there, you know.
Hmm.
and just working your way to where you're comfortable.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
And how important would you say is the concept of trust as well as the concept of surrendering? Because the most
Yeah,
important phrase in mediumship that I've come to know is trust and surrender. So, what would you
yeah,
say to the
yeah.
people with their issues of trust?
I love that. I believe that that's the chapter of the name of my first chapter is trust,
Oh,
because it really, although you receive, unless you accept that or surrender to what you're receiving, I don't know that your trust is ever going to build. And I think until you make that sort of logical decision, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to trust, I think it's hard to grow past that.
yeah,
So that's what I would say.
yeah.
Just do it, man.
Yeah, exactly. Because what's so critical in when I'm teaching mediumship to my students, you can see them struggling. It's like they're getting something, but it goes back to that thing we were talking about in the very beginning. It's like, is this my imagination or is this real? Or this is too wild and too wacky and too out there for me to even bring forward. But if that's the beauty of it. The weirder and wackier and wilder it is, the more real it is. And
Right.
sometimes when it's too good to be true, it is. When it's part of a thought pattern that has been a linear thought pattern, one after the other, that's when you know it's just your mind talking, because that's the way our minds work. They work
Yeah.
in patterns in linear fashion. When it's items that are wild and weird and wacky that are coming out of nowhere, coming out of complete left field, out of the
Yeah.
blue, with no syncopation, no pattern whatsoever, just completely out there, that spirit. And so that's the way people can start to feel the understanding and the difference and say, okay, this is completely weird, but, and then to say, okay, I'm going to allow that to be, I'm going to surrender to that concept, and I'm just going to trust what I get, and I'm going to give what I get. And that's the
Yeah.
way you open up, and you just got to allow.
Yes. Totally agree. I know one of the funniest things I ever got, which still stays with me today, is adorned alpaca. And I was doing a reading for a lady who had just moved into the town that I'm in. And I thought, what is this? And I said, does an adorned alpaca make sense to you? She said, yes, I have a Samoyed who's, blizzard white. And I always buy these very fancy collars for her, like with rhinestones in her name. She has like 7 of them. I'm like, oh, and she was very concerned about her dog just getting, settled after the move. So,
Yeah, there you go.
but yeah, it's weird stuff, things you just never think.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
It can be the absolute strangest thing that's coming through, and the whole idea is that it's not meant for us; it's meant for the recipient. So of course, it's not going to make any sense to us, which is the whole point. We're nothing but an instrument. We're nothing but a relay station for the recipient. And
yeah,
so when we get that information, we're supposed to give it out to the recipient without a filter. I mean, obviously, don't say uh, harmful or less than tactful things,
right.
but but to relay the information as it's meant to be, because it's not for us, it's for that recipient. And we're not the ones to filter out, oh no, I'm sorry, that is just too weird for me, so I can't give it out. Oh yes, you do.
Yeah. Sorry, that's like unacceptable. What's the next thing you have?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
for me, that was my biggest hurdle when I was developing early on, was getting over that belief that, okay, it's so wackadoodle that it can't be right. It's so not normal that I can't give it out. When in fact, the crazier and wackier it is, the more holy smokes, that's so messed up. It's got to be right.
yes. And I also find that sometimes when it's even just the beginning piece of a message, like, oh, there's a man standing at the end of this pier. Oh, he's got these crazy clothes on. And all of a sudden it unfolds that, oh, there's a boat. Oh, it's set up for his party. Oh, it's his birthday. Look at all the people. You know what I mean? The more that you engage with spirit and give what you're getting,
Yep.
more, for me, more will be added. So
Hmm.
I think that's an important thing to do. It's like, that's trust both ways, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the other thing people have encountered is that they are staying on the surface. They'll give what they get, but it's something that they don't stick with it long enough. To your point, maybe you'll get on the surface that initial vision of the guy on a dock wearing weird clothes. If you don't stick with it and keep delving down deeper into what's
Yeah.
really there. And it's like, as opposed to glancing at somebody, you stare at them for 10 minutes and you get all the details. Once you stare at them, get all the details, get and immerse yourself in that environment. And then you start to see everything unfolding because you're seeing it all unfold.
Yeah.
Most people just kind of glance at it and then they go away and they never get into the details. So give the
Yeah.
details because that's going to make it come to fruition.
I love that you talk about that moment when you make the decision to dive deeper, because I had joined a class at one point because I felt like I was a medium that was ADD. Like, I was so nervous about being able to get information that it was like, oh, there's a house and this is the color and this is cars down the street and the other. But I never went into the houses. I never looked to see who was there and what they did and what was their
Yeah.
family. Like, there's a million more things to know. And until I got into a class that specifically was about diving deeper, I just didn't realize what I was doing until
Yeah.
I did that. But I think that's an excellent point, because we
Yeah.
really want more.
Yeah, and one of my mentors years ago was likening this to an iceberg. Typically, most people will just look at whatever's floating on the surface and they'll describe that top 1% of the iceberg, and they ignore the other 99% of the iceberg where all the gold nuggets reside that have all the incredible detail that you can actually reveal. So if you put on your scuba gear, you go diving down deep and you start to see all this other 99% of the stuff. You're like, holy smokes, this is incredible. Look at all this gold stuff. It's pure gold. And you just give everything you're experiencing. And lo and behold, you are just giving out this incredible information.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what else is interesting is if you scuba dive down on that one, glacier there, you are actually, you are not using the energy to go, in my case, from house to house to house or yard or people, are right. It's all right there. And the deeper you go, the more, like you say, it unfolds. It's actually an easier,
Hmm.
more enjoyable reading for the sitter, and I think the medium also.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because it's also going back to the concept of the law of conservation of energy. You're literally conserving your energy in that flow,
Yeah.
and you become one with it. And it's all of a sudden you're by blending with what you're experiencing, you're also blending with the spirit because the spirit's bringing it all to you.
Yes.
You don't really have to
Yes.
go for them, and that's the whole basis of really blending so closely is don't try.
Yeah.
When the
Yes.
less you try and the more you just experience, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, agreed. Let them talk about what they want, what they came to talk about.
Yeah,
And I
because
think a lot of times we're like trying to tick the box, like,
mm-hmm,
what are your hobbies? What kind of car did you drive?
mm-hmm, yeah, we're going right down that
Yeah.
dreaded evidence list. Okay, give me this, give me this, give me this, give me this. When guess what? They're the ones who know their life best. They're going to give
Yeah.
you what they know that is going to be impactful for the recipient.
Yeah. And if they want to talk about the ranch with the horses and their favorite dogs and what they had for breakfast every day, like, let's do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think the fear is for so many mediums is that in the beginning or at some point if they're connecting and blending with the spirit communicator and all of a sudden there's either a silence or a pause or there's a gap in the information, all of a sudden they either a get afraid that they're losing their link, or b they're saying, okay, well now I got to fill that gap and I'm going to fill that gap by asking questions when you should be instead getting closer to the communicator and say, all right, let's blend some more, and it'll just drop in.
Yes. Oh, I love that description. Yeah, just pull them closer. They're right there.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's like I'm always telling people, yeah, step into the communicator's shoes, put on their overcoat, and become them.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
there's one of my mentors, Janet Nohavik, who one of the greatest mediums around.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she's passed, but she
Yeah.
was one of my teachers, and that was what she kept on harping on. Just become them, put on their coat, and wear everything about them, and the two of you will blend so tightly. You'll become one person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you mention her because when you talk about evidence, I almost said the word spatula. Does that ring a bell for you from her book, Spatula? She had done a reading and she didn't know what this word was. And she kept getting, no, she kept getting spatula,
Spatula. Okay.
spatula, spatula. And finally she says, when she looks at the person who's coming to do the reading, the last name was Spatula. And so, but that, it's so funny. I never got to do any work with her.
Mhm.
I did a little bit of work with Mavis Patilla.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah. But like her book about mediumship was just so concise
Mm.
and the exercises. And, I just really enjoyed her book for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and she was an incredible stickler for getting the evidence, and she was one of the best teachers around to really bring evidential mediumship to the place where it is today. She, Mavis Patilla, and Gordon Higginson,
Yeah.
some of the best mediums around. Now they're all in spirit. Now they're being spirit teachers, right? So
Right.
now they can really teach us. But
Yes.
so hopefully they're always teaching us as much as possible. What when people often say, okay, well, I'm feeling signs, or I'm seeing signs, or I'm getting signs from spirit. Oh no, that's just my imagination. That's too easy a sign. What would you say to people who are either looking for signs or think they see signs? Are there specific signs you think spirit tries to send us, give us, alert us to?
It's funny. I would tell people first, I would tell them, yes, it's a sign. And then I would tell them, maybe you want to start a journal or set up a journal so that you can kind of keep track of what's going on. But I mean, anything that would put them closer if they're I used to walk during the pandemic. I walked with a lady in my neighborhood like every day. And we always
Mm.
had the same route because we were just talking. We didn't want to care about directions, but we'd always go by the same fence where there's a bird on this fence. And every day she's like, that's my dad. And we would end that walk with her smiling. And I always thought, whether the lady at that house feeds that bird at the same time every day and we happen, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
She's connecting with her dad in that way. Um, yeah, I just feel like there's just so many things. Being sensitive to what am I feeling if you're getting chills, if you're seeing things like synchronicities, symbols like maybe it's a bird or people dimes. I have a friend who talks about her brother leaving her dimes. And sometimes it's on the bed, sometimes it's at the front door, and these are very unique things that like she never told anybody because she said, who's going to believe that this is actually happening?
Yeah.
I'm like, I know. And you don't have to share that, but that connection
Hmm.
is for you. And that's what I feel like the journal does for me. It sort of validates my experience
Yeah.
of what signs and synchronicities, symbols,
Hmm.
sometimes it's you put on the radio, all of a sudden there's some kind of song there that is something your brother loved,
Yeah.
from the
And
favorite band.
it's one thing I love is that because it's so easy to say, oh yeah, that's just a chance, it's a coincidence because it's so common, and whatever. It's like for example, like the dime. Somebody can say, oh yeah, well that was my dime, I left that on the on the bed, whatever. But when you start to say, okay, spirit, if you're really going to show me a sign, I need you to show me something so unusual. Show me that pink elephant, or pick something weird, wacky, wild, and unusual that's probably unlikely to happen, and you'll be surprised just how it manifests itself. Number
Yes.
of times that's happened, where I can remember being once in the office years ago, and I said, all right, Spirit, if you're really here, just give me, and I forget what it was. It was like give me a pink feather or something. And it's the other day, I'm walking out of the, the office in the parking garage, and I'm like, yeah, right. There's no such thing as spirit. And I'm going into the parking garage, and halfway in towards my car, there was this big pink feather right at my feet. I'm like, huh? How the hell did a big giant pink feather, when there's no feathers around here? How'd that happen? And I had to pick it up and look at it and go, I'm gonna have to reconsider this.
Right. Yes.
And things like that
Yes,
happen
you
all the
are.
time. And I heard somebody doing that with like the pink elephant, and they're like, all right, Spirit, if you're really true, if you're really around, then I demand to see a pink elephant. And they're joking, going, ha, 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 that'll never happen. What happens? Next morning, person goes to their office, they turn on the computer, a pink elephant shows up on the screen. And they're like, what?
Like, you can't deny that.
No.
Those are things that are like, you just have to say, I was wrong, and move on.
Like, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
You're totally out there. Like, no, this cannot be happening. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that just blows my mind. But if it keeps on happening, it's no longer a coincidence, and the wackier it is, it's not a coincidence. And the fact is, there are no coincidences. Everything is nothing but a synchronous event. Some are smaller, some are bigger.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I feel like when spirit, every time you ask and you're seeing synchronistic situations that are helpful, how can you deny that? Acceptance.
I mean that's and that's the whole problem. It's like somebody always wants to wave it off and go, oh yeah, well, it's wishful thinking, yada yada yada. Well, it's your perspective. You can make it wishful thinking if you want to. You can say, you can deny it, but why are you bothering to deny it?
I would rather live in a magical world, quite honestly.
Yeah,
I would rather not deny it, accept it, and be like, yeah, we all have this magic available.
I'd rather go back to my childhood because it was a lot easier back then. Well, super. What if you were to give a listener one piece of advice or one piece of help? What one thing would you tell a listener today that you think you feel might help them?
Honestly, I would tell them, be brave, be curious, and explore.
Great words of wisdom. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And Tammy, I loved having you on the show. I think this could have lasted a good long time.
Thank you, Chris. I loved being here. I really enjoyed this.
Great. How can people get in contact with you?
You can find me at tammyyoungmedium.com. I'm also on Instagram at tymedium. I'm also on Facebook as Tammy Young Psychic Medium.
Great. Well, that'll be in the show notes, so be sure to take a look at the show notes. And again, thank you for listening in on another episode, and always let us know if you have ideas for the different episodes, different people, what have you. And by all means, remember to like and subscribe to the show. That way you'll never miss an episode. It'll always drop into your feed. And with that, this is Chris Lippincott signing off, sending you love and light, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.